Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Procurify. If you've enjoyed the content we put out here, a great way to say thank you, after obviously giving us a 5-star review and sharing with your friends, is checking out Procurify. Procurify is the procure to pay platform for charter schools. Basically, that means they help your school manage all the various manual aspects of the purchasing process in one platform. You can learn more at byq.org/procurify. That's PROCURIFY. All right, now back to the show.
Welcome to Charter School Insider, lessons from the nation's top charter school operators, the only podcast dedicated to the behind-the-scenes business of running a successful charter school. Join us as we sit down with charter school leaders who share how they are overcoming the biggest operational hurdles facing their schools today.
Tom, thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to have you on the show.
Appreciate the opportunity, Daniel, to share a little bit about what Visions has done the past 20 years and where we're going. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to share what we've been doing.
Cool. Well, I wanted to start with just some context on Visions. So Visions in Education is one of the largest non-classroom based charter schools really in the nation. I know you guys are out in California, but really nationwide. We have a lot of school-based kind of traditional, listeners who subscribe to the show. So could you just paint a picture for us as to what non-classroom based means practically, and then who exactly does Visions serve? Because I think getting a sense for that scale is helpful before we dive into the discussion today.
Absolutely. So Visions is a charter school. We're in our 25th year. That's really uncommon in the charter school marketplace. And we serve over 7,500 students this past year. And we had about 1,000 kid wait list at the beginning of the year with those 7,500 students served.
Wow.
We basically operate as a nonprofit that is teaching students, and we run 4 to 5 different programs that are available to families who want choices. And that might be a homeschool program. And then we have several online programs. We have an online middle school, online high school that serves a more at-risk population. And then we have an online university prep program that serves a more advanced type of student. And so, but all of those different programs are for families who want something different for a lot of different reasons. Flexibility and safety are really core to why people come to choose us. And we have people who are teen parents involved with sports or working, parents who want their kids to be at home with them so that, they have a bigger part in their child's education. And so we serve a gamut of students, and exciting, and that's because we get to do so many different things and we get to figure that out. And I think one of the benefits of that is we have great scalability because of that. We're one entity running 5 different schools versus 5 entities running individual schools. And I think we have a lot of efficiencies through that. And those 7,500 students are spread across 9,200 square miles. And so, our students are in the communities in 9 counties in Northern California, spread across 9,200 square miles. And we have one central headquarters that is where we manage all the administrative, technology, business operations, et cetera. We're across 9,200 square miles providing services via homeschooling with the teacher and the parent meeting in the home or in the community, or via online services through our various online systems.
Right. You mentioned the scalability offers, allows you to do a lot of cool things. You're kind of running multiple programs. You can serve students and families who are looking for one track and, a totally different subset of learners for a different track. That provides a lot of cool, impactful things that you can do. Practically on the business side, you're the chief operating officer. What are some of the operational challenges that having this kind of a multimodal, multi-track option creates, specifically as it relates to the topic I wanted to get into today with you, which is kind of resourcing all of these families. Just tell us a little bit about how you all think about, basically operationalizing school across such a large geographic area.
Yeah, it's complicated, no doubt. But I think it's also the fun of it.
Sure.
Me and my team I've been with Visions for 21 years, and many of my team on the operational side have been with me for 19, 17, 18, 15 years. So the core group of us have been working together because we're really invested in the mission of the school. We all have our own stories as to why we're here at Visions, but I think that's a powerful glue that keeps us together. And so having multiple programs in these multiple modalities it's complicated, but it's also fun to solve these types of situations and develop solutions to meet the needs of all these students. And to me, that's what's been one of the funnest things about working here. We get to have this entrepreneurial kind of mindset in solving problems and doing it to serve students from a variety of backgrounds and needs. So I think the complexity is definitely a challenge, but it's the fun of the job because we have solved many of those challenges from, when COVID came, we didn't miss a beat really. We shut down the administrative building, but everything we were doing previously was what we kept doing. We enroll kids via online methods and process orders for stuff and services online via our various internal systems that we've built to help us manage this. And so the complexity of dealing with so many different types of vendors, we have at any point in time may have close to 800 different vendors. And that means it's 800 different ways of doing business. And we have to kind of figure it out over time. Again, we've been around for 25 years, how to optimize our practices and partner with our vendors to help them learn our systems and we learn their systems, but then how do we do that to make it easy for everybody to get the orders processed and get the vendors paid, because vendors want to get paid quickly. And we partnered with them to say, okay, we'll make it faster to get you paid if you work with us on these pieces of the puzzle. And so I think it's a partnership with the vendors, but I think it's having that mindset to begin with and having the mindset of how do we solve this problem? Because there's a lot of difficulties dealing with vendors, so many vendors across so many square miles when you don't have a central location. When you're at a brick and mortar school, you can go to the supply room, you can get, order stuff. The district sends a truck, the warehouse folks, and they deliver it, and they go to the supply closet, you get what you need, and boom, pretty straightforward. We don't have those spaces.
Yeah, totally different situation. So I know that today in your current state, you guys have really leveraged technology to manage a lot of this. And you alluded to that, building your own proprietary systems, integrating with vendors. You can tell over time you all have continued to iterate and iterate and iterate, like you mentioned, having that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. Take us back. You mentioned you've been there 21 years. Before we get into the current state and some of the cool things you all have been able to do, take us back to kind of the early days, especially as it relates to managing procurement, getting materials and resources out to all these families and teachers. What did that look like in the early days? How were you getting materials, resources out for students all over the place?
So I came in 2004, and Amazon, as you know it today, back in 2004, there really were no online marketplaces and vendors, and technology was non-existent for the most part. And so when I arrived, we were issuing purchase orders for crayons and erasers. And so we had a whole giant room full of file cabinets where we stored copies of the PO sorted by every student. So a student would fax or mail in a purchase requisition. And at that time, we were part of a district. And so we had to use their purchasing system, which issued purchase orders. And if in today's world, who uses POs in an online environment? Very few vendors even take POs today. It's credit card or some sort of integration. And so we had thousands and thousands of POs, and it was a tremendously inefficient, ineffective process, which really choked off our growth, because for us to grow and serve our students, we have to be able to resource them with materials, books, supplies, and the services. And so with all that being processed, the purchase order that's getting faxed in or mailed in, and having to only partner with vendors who will take purchase orders, that really limits who you can do business with. And so, we were in a place where we were in significant decline as a school, because we were just, at the time we had shrunk down to almost 2,800 students, because we just couldn't get out of support students using all these manual processes. And so it was kind of a crazy time for sure,
Right. So functionally it was, if you add 500 students, you need to get them, depending on which, sub vertical they're in within Visions, you need to get them a certain set of curriculum, a certain set of materials, maybe, particular services, depending on programs they're in. And so what you're saying is essentially you were kind of hamstrung by your own ability to operationalize a certain level of scale. What was the impact on teachers and staff during that time where processes were a little bit more manual? Like, what were some of the impacts on the staff?
Oh, it was huge. So one, we take for granted where we are today.
Yeah.
A couple clicks and you got a package on your doorstep tomorrow. There was none of that infrastructure in the industry, in the marketplace in 2004. So we had to order stuff, sometimes in bulk, and maintain it in a central warehouse in Carmichael, which is centralized to 9 counties. But then we would either have to reship it ourselves, or families would have to come in from 9 counties, 9,200 square miles. Teachers and families would have to come in to the central warehouse to get materials, or we would have to then order it and ship it to the teachers or the families directly. Again, that process back then was much slower than it is today. And so when you have a process where you have to put in a requisition and the requisition gets faxed in, then we got to manually enter that into a vendor's website or mail them or fax them the purchase order and wait for them to process the order. You're talking the time from request to when the order is actually placed with the vendor is weeks. And then we have to get it shipped. So a kid enrolls on September 1st, they might not have materials until the late part of September. Well, that doesn't optimize their educational experience when they don't have textbooks. The teachers are then, getting peppered by the parent. Hey, where's my materials? Right. And the teachers, calling central office saying, where's the order? And we didn't have visibility into those orders because there was no integration. So it's a lot of time wasted on processing orders manually, trying to figure out where the status of those orders are. And, we didn't have tracking in 2004. There was no log on and see what the status of the order, where the tracking is. All of that was a big wait and see because it was just, this ineffective process. So our students weren't getting the best experience unless they lived close by where they could come in and get the materials from the central warehouse. And that doesn't serve all students equally well. Some of our kids, we have a wide diversity of students from, very low income to people who are coming from a higher middle class environment. Driving into Carmichael is not the end of the world.
Right.
Someone who doesn't have a car, has only one car, and that's cars to work, and they don't have the way to get to the central office to get their materials, they're going to be at a disadvantage because they're not getting their materials for 3 to 4 weeks through this manual process. So it created a lot of inequities in many ways, and also really challenged our ability to grow beyond, we're in Sacramento County, Northern California, but all of our outlying counties, it really limited our ability to grow into those outlying counties because families just wouldn't tolerate waiting or having to drive into Carmichael to get materials and services. And so, it created a really impacting parents and students' ability to get their materials to start their instructional experience with us. And teachers were having to spend a lot of time following up on orders. Where are we at? And even at central office, I've been central office for all this time, and to try to call a vendor and say, where's the order, was time consuming. It wasn't like you could just log on to a website and figure it out.
Totally.
You had to actually talk to somebody and have them, look on their system online and tell you what's going on with those orders. And just a very time consuming process, which meant, we didn't have the ability to scale up and serving students. And so our growth was very limited by that because we couldn't ultimately just hire a bunch of people, when we were smaller and we didn't have the means to hire more people to help grow us out of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you were describing this, whether it's filing the POs or calling the vendor to track down the order or communicating with the upset parent or trying to get back to your 37 teachers who've asked about, this order and that order, I'm just thinking in my head, who's doing all that work? How many people are on your team to try and manage all those different things?
At that time, we had like 6 people.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to process orders and then respond to all those questions and then process those orders fast. You're just not going to be able to do that quickly enough to please everybody.
Right.
And so we were in a constant state of, it was not a comfortable place because we were never pleasing anybody in this environment.
Yeah. Someone's always frustrated.
When school starts, August and September, it's the peak for the whole world in education. And so vendors are busy and crazy. And so again, it's just a lot of those things, we didn't have the systems to kind of manage the ordering timelines and such. We were kind of all thrown into the peak periods with everybody else. And, again, just everybody was frustrated. So it was really I think it was a learning process for us and the families who wanted to be with us for the flexibility of and all that. But then they're also they had to accept there was going to be this frustration because we're not a school site with a book closet that you can just go grab your textbooks and materials. That doesn't exist in our environment unless you were close by to Carmichael. At the time, we had a warehouse. And over time, we don't need a warehouse because of the technology advances and where we are today. It's just-in-time ordering and just-in-time delivering. And there's no need for me to have a warehouse to provide materials.
So I want to talk more about that. Obviously, we don't have time to go into all the various iterations. 20 years of iteration and advent of new technologies have obviously allowed you all to really operationalize things, grow the organization, scale, as you mentioned, make things more just-in-time experience, and really change the experience for families. Could you just maybe give us some of the, I guess, what I would call the game changers or the highlights along the way, the short version of 20 years of iteration, and maybe just highlight a couple of the places where there were inflection points that really changed the game for you all in using technology to, manage the procurement process and all the administrative burden that went along with it?
So I've been here since 2004, and then we started working on an online purchase requisition system, which we call LPAD. The first iterations were clunky, very clunky, and we learned as we went. But I think the biggest takeaway from that is we had to get rid of those POs. And then we went to, let's purchase with credit cards. And so that in and of itself was an innovative transformation to say, let's get credit cards to buy online versus having to issue POs. So that was kind of the first major inflection of let's get rid of purchase orders, because that's a huge time-consuming process on the ordering part, but then also let's automate the requisition of that stuff. And that's where we started with the Launchpad, LPAD development to try to simplify the requisitioning of materials so that could be done online for the families and the teachers. And then on the buying side, we transitioned to using credit cards, which opened up faster order processing, more vendors, because a lot of throughout the time, the fledgling online systems, they weren't taking purchase orders. They wanted credit cards. They wanted to get paid immediately. And, they needed their monies and cash flows. And POs are typically a much delayed ordering and payment process. And so it's kind of like, creating a system to optimize ordering for families and teachers using credit cards. And then over time, looking for a vendor that could maintain that virtual warehouse for us. So we partnered with several vendors along the way who were willing to warehouse and then have a system where we can order online. And it was very rudimentary, but it was better than nothing because it allowed us to ship directly to students and teachers instead of having them come centrally to get these materials. And they were going to host these inventories in their warehouse environments, which allowed us to not have to manage inventory because that's its own bear. We transitioned out of having that central warehouse and kind of moving that to some of these vendors. But what we found was some of these vendors, they didn't have the capabilities or interest in saying, I want to manage textbooks, I want to manage crayons, I want to manage paint, I want to manage paper. It was mostly just textbooks, and then we still had to figure out ways to provide supplies to students. And so there was lots of iterations with that and trying to sort out, we would prepackage kits. So we would build an elementary kit and a high school kit and have it all full of different supplies. Well, that was very costly and wasteful because not every kid needed everything.
Right.
And so we were like overpaying for that, but it was a way for us to have these kits ready to go and have them shipped directly to students and families because, me doing it with my team of people, we're not optimized for that. And so having a vendor that was willing to take that on was a great eye opener to say, okay, there's a better way. And again, Amazon wasn't Amazon back in that time. We were dealing with some of the other big players, Barnes & Noble, Textbook X, and MBS, and some of these other online vendors who had solutions, but there were very limited solutions. Barnes & Noble, MBS, some of those vendors, they do textbooks. They don't do supplies. What we were trying to do is find somebody that could do everything. And over time, we discovered that Amazon got better in their development as an organization and what they were doing and what they were supplying. And so looking for those online vendors and finding different vendors, we actually partnered with several other vendors throughout the years to provide supplies. But every one of those vendors were different. The technologies were different at times. So it was really complicated. So I'd have one integration with one vendor that had a certain way of doing it, and then another integration with a different vendor, and they had a different. So my team had to be able to understand how to navigate all that and still keep it seamless and transparent to our users that there was all these different types of integrations. But then, over the years, we figured out that Amazon was a place for us to focus our energies. And that's been a great experience for us because Amazon was a real big partner in trying to help us solve our solutions and willing to help us do some of that.
Yeah, I want to talk more about, you've mentioned Amazon a couple of times. I want to talk more about the role of Amazon Business and some of the ways you all have been able to customize things with them. You all have been able to leverage some of their API capabilities for your Launchpad system. Before we get into that, just to kind of recap, it sounds like the sort of process you went through was, okay, what's the manual function that we're doing? Can we outsource that to a vendor, or can we get it onto our technology system? And then you would repeat that and iterate, repeat that and iterate. And so over time, all of a sudden, the inventory is not on you. The reconciliation is not on you. Payments are being processed immediately instead of through a PO. And to get you to where you are today, as you worked through that process, before we talk specifically about the role of Amazon, I'm curious what the iteration cycle was like for that, because I'm sure other teams are, who might be listening to this might be wondering, okay, did that take 10 years or did that take concerted effort for 6 months and they were able to move the needle on some of those things? Could you speak to some of that a little bit?
So being at a school district, I've worked at school districts for as well prior to coming to Visions. There's not a lot of space for innovation. They're kind of set in their ways. They get locked in, and that's how they do it. And they still, that's what they do. I think that was one of the most attractive pieces of being at Visions is, we have the ability to, if there's a good idea, we do it. And so we have been working on this to get to where we are from day one. From when I got here, it was like, how do we get this better? Because this was do or die for me. I got laid off from a school district, and the lady offered me a job at Vision. And I had 2 young kids. It's like, I got to make this work. So
Right.
I wasn't about to have this fail on me. And so I had to figure stuff out. And so it has definitely been an iterative process over the years. But I think we were able to get some early wins, and which gave me that track record within the organization to give me resources to commit to this work. And, I like to call it compound interest. So for 21 years, we've been getting compound interest on those investments of time and energy. But I think we did it when there was no reference points. There was no books. There was no ByQ. There was no Daniel Caselli bringing in the leaders to help improve things. It was kind of like trial and error. So we had a lot of error in that process for sure. And I was fortunate to have, leadership that was willing to invest, give me the resources to continually invest and add the tech talent needed to make these ideas come to fruition. And so it is definitely not a short-term endeavor. But I think, what you are providing to the community is best practices and not having to recreate the wheel. And so you get to learn from others. And I think that would have been nice to have had those types of thought partners way back at the beginning. Instead, we just kind of had to figure it out. And so there was a lot of start and stopping and restarting. And, when I talk about the system that we've built internally, we threw away 3 or 4 versions of that over the years. As we built it, and it was, that's no good. We're not going to do that again. And we rebuilt it and we rebuilt it. But each one of those was an improvement over the last one. And everything was an improvement over the POs and having to wait and create that. So we definitely invested a lot of time and energy. But I think people that are looking at this today get the benefit of there's an infrastructure that exists out there for folks.
Right.
And there's people out there that have done it and they can learn from that. But it is a commitment of time and energy. We have business analysts in our organization, which is, when I was starting out in school districts, you had clerks and managers.
Right. Nobody has a business analyst. Yeah.
And so when I came to Visions, we had 0 business analysts. Now we have 20. And that group of people provide this know-how and knowledge to leverage processes, system design, building out systems and doing those things. And then we got a programming team that is also in place that we kind of bring those great ideas and make it happen. And then we are able to create good processes and documentation and all those types of things that are really necessary to have a system take hold and be optimized. And so it was not a one and done, hit a home run and we're great. It was a lot of work because we had to learn on our own how to do this. And there was no textbook and manual how to get to these places. And now there is, I believe, because there's a lot of people out there that are, taking advantage of the new technologies and really being open to changing up their practices. So I think that's the good news, but it is still a lot of work. And you need to have the right people in place to help an organization adopt these types of practices and processes. But I think, I definitely attest that these types of processes and systems and people will make you money. They will create efficiencies that will pay for themselves. And I think that's a big component of what, we've done here at Visions. I'm a $110 million a year operation, and I have 2 AP clerks that are able to process the payments for $110 million worth of stuff. We spend on an annual basis about $10 to $12 million for student purchases, being technology, services, and stuff. And I'm able to pay all those bills with 2 AP clerks. I've had 2 AP clerks for the past 10 years. My budget was 47 million when we started full-heartedly into these technology solutions. And I've basically been able to double that budget, over double, and still continue to have 2 AP clerks because of the automation that we've been able to implement. And so while it's been a difficult journey, I have no doubt it's been hard, but we've been able to create efficiencies that allowed me to pay for 20 analysts that are creating operational improvements, reporting that we could never have dreamed because we didn't have the manpower. But I've been able to keep those 2 AP clerk positions. And I've talked to one school that had like 10 AP clerks, similar size and similar operations to us, and they had 10 AP clerks. And I was like, man, that's like $1 million in salary.
Yeah, totally.
If you're using at a lower level task, much better to take that salary and use it for higher level positions that can provide greater value to the organization in better processes, better systems, better documentation.
Right.
And so I think that's been the benefit of those investments.
Well, I think that's the key takeaway here is at the beginning, you alluded to the fact that your leadership team supported you and having kind of a, no pun intended, having a vision for where visions could be and having the willingness to say, hey, we might not get it right, but we're going to innovate because this is where things are headed. And we know that there's operational efficiencies and value at the end of this kind of curve of continuing to iterate. And clearly it's paying off and continuing to pay off. I want to take us back to Amazon Business, who you mentioned you all have been able to do some unique things with them. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've customized your use of Amazon, some of the capabilities that are allowing you to do unique things, and how that's changed things for your team, ops, finance, et cetera?
Yes, I'll kind of walk you through the history with Amazon because we started using them back in 2011 and 12 when we started saying, when we made that shift to credit cards, because Amazon wouldn't take POs. So they were not even a vendor for us. But once we made this shift to credit cards, now we could use Amazon, which was better than having to issue a PO to some office provider or textbook vendor or whatever. So really, once we were able to use the credit cards, even manually processing credit card transactions was better than what we had with some vendors having to use POs. So when that happened, we were doing about $100,000 to $150,000 a year with Amazon via manually processed credit card transactions. And so over time, we knew, we could see that parents liked shopping on Amazon. Amazon was becoming a thing, and it was becoming ubiquitous, right? And so we knew, families wanted to use it, and it was like you can get anything you need on Amazon at that. And it was you started seeing what was happening. And I wish I would have invested in Amazon back then, but I didn't see that. But just from a user perspective, it was you could see where people were going with this. So then I started, like I said, we had these integrations with other vendors, and so I knew that was a possibility, but I just didn't know how to figure it out, how to make that connection with Amazon. And so we started trying to poke around their website, and then we found some vendors that did consulting and different things. And back in probably about 2014, we finally made a connection with the folks at Amazon that did these integrations, which was become, I guess, Amazon Business. We met with a team of folks. And so I was looking through my emails. It was like about 2014, we started talking to these people. And that's when we started work on creating this integration with Amazon, which allowed our families to log into our system and then jump off into the Amazon website to shop, but not shop as an individual consumer, but shop as a student of Visions. And so what that allowed us to do is for them to place the order, and that order information comes into our system, and that's really where we track their budget. Because we don't want them paying for it themselves. We want to pay for it, and we want to be able to track that. When we were processing these orders on the credit card, that requisition came in one screen. We had to hand enter it onto the Amazon, go shop on Amazon, key it in, process the order, put the credit card in, boom, your transaction done. Well, when you do that, there's delays, there's fat fingering, ordering the wrong item, and all kinds of rigmarole that goes along with that. So once we were able to build this integration, the initial integration with them, it allowed us to eliminate the double entry because they came in, jumped out, shop, all that data came back into our system automatically, and that fed us the ordered information, and eventually the tracking information came. It didn't come in over all at once, because they were improving their systems. And so as they were improving, we got the benefit of all those improvements. And as that momentum started getting better, we were getting better shipping costs, and they were getting better, the speed of their shipping. and not getting lost shipments and all that. Everything just got better over time. And as that all got better, our volume went from, like I said, 160 back in 2012, 2013, 2014 to now where we're doing 3 million a year with them, because there's so much now being processed through them because it's just easy. We can get really good priced items. The shipping's, many times is low cost or free. And the visibility to tracking and whether an item was back ordered or and when it was processed, all of that has come over time as they've developed their systems. And that's allowed us to get the benefit of that. And families love it. Teachers love it. I think that's just as they've gotten mature, it's allowed our families and staff to use them even more, which has allowed us to streamline our order processing. And then because so much volume is going through Amazon, the payment processes, which were very time consuming and tedious, were streamlined because we're making just a handful of payments a month versus individual credit card payments. And so all of that has just led to, massive efficiencies for us, which has saved us a tremendous amount on labor in the accounting department for us and allowed us to repurpose that labor dollar into these higher value positions. Again, the big, beautiful part about this is we've been able to scale up and grow the number of students we could serve without really missing a beat, because one of the biggest benefits is Amazon, because we're doing so much volume for them to supply our students with materials. And simultaneously, we were also developing our systems to improve the ordering of services with, we have another 800 vendors for our service vendors, which is karate, tutoring, music lessons, and all these types of things we offer our families and students. We've also developed our system to enable that to be easier, faster, and more streamlined. And just the kind of concentration of efficiencies through technology has allowed us to continue to grow in our enrollments and without having to have extra costs associated with labor to manage that growth on the operational side.
Right. You can keep your operational overhead relatively steady as you continue to grow and grow.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge scalability that we've been able to benefit on. And that's translated in, those improved services and systems means the teachers aren't having to spend their time, hey, what's happening with my order? Well, you just go log into our system and you can see the tracking, you can see the status of the order, you can see the tracking on it. And that volume of questions that we talked about at the beginning when it was manual has evaporated. And so teachers and families could focus on their students and their instruction, and it's almost like self-help because they could just see what they need to see without having to call us. Now, they still call us for other things, but the volume is not what it used to be, which allows a small team of people to serve more students. And so that's really been a huge benefit for us, as you mentioned, to keep that operational overhead low, which allows us to then fund those 20 business analysts and fund social workers and fund more counselors. Whereas, this reference point that I have is someone told me that, they have similar number of students, but they have 10 AP clerks. It's like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dollars that could be repurposed to serve students more directly.
Yeah. What I love about this conversation is the North Star doesn't change, which is the emphasis on families and students and making that experience really good. And having that approach of we're not just seeking efficiency for efficiency's sake, we're seeking efficiency because we know those are valuable resources that we can funnel back into, higher ROI services or staff positions or, the digital experience for families and students. That idea is very attractive to other operational leaders. How can we be using technology? How can we be using automation? How can we be, transforming what we're doing on the operational side to better serve the organization, better serve families? So as we come to a close, I want to ask you just kind of reflectively, as you think about this journey you've had, and this doesn't have to be specific to Amazon or even Launchpad, but I'm curious if you have any recommendations or thoughts for others who are, and we talked a little bit about this, who want to take on, systems change projects or who want to introduce efforts to use technology and automation to improve the experience for their schools. What are some of the recommendations you have for those folks on where should they start? What do you recommend? As you said, you had to cut your teeth a lot with the team working through this. If you could shortchange the learning curve a little bit for others, what are some of your recommendations?
I think you really want to focus on keeping it simple. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And I think in my experience here, the challenge has always been, there's always the next new thing in education that people want to, chase the shiny new thing. And, operational efficiencies is not sexy and fun, but it's important. And, I think
Yeah.
being able to kind of communicate that story to the leadership, your board or your leaders is key, because I think there's an underappreciation for what the operations enables a school to do. I mean, I know, I go to these conferences and all that, go to the sessions, and it's a number one reason why charter schools close is related to fiscal issues. Well, if that's the case, that needs to be a focus for people to make sure their house is in order. So I think it is making sure you're thinking it through. Make sure you go get your consultants that can help you establish what the baseline should be as far as best practices. And I think sometimes you want to make sure you're getting the right folks to help you with those conversations, because I think you don't want to chase the shiny thing that isn't going to provide long-term value for the organization. And so I think so that's number one, is like, keep it simple. Don't try to do too many things. What can you do to make things better and make it happen? Because if you try to do too much, then you're going to fail across the board. So I think try to keep it simple, focus, pick a couple things and try to do it and be committed to that best you can. I think another thing I would say is don't let perfect get in the way of good enough. That's our mantra of sorts, because everything we do is not perfect, and we're not going to please everyone. But if we've improved the experience for 80% of the people, man, we succeeded. And then we'll get the next thing we do is 80% of the people again, we succeeded. And that's where that compound interest I talk about, it's that continuously improving, not looking for perfection, because it doesn't exist. And so you're going to make mistakes, and you're like, oh, okay, we improved some there. And now whatever you implement, you will have, we could have done that better. Okay, now the next time we take that into account, and guess what? When you get to that point and you finish that, you'll have found something else you could have done better. I think so. Being able to have that mindset of perfection is not something you're striving for. I mean, certainly we want to improve, absolutely, but I think I've seen where people get so focused on perfection that they don't get the good enough.
Yeah, they don't take any action. They're stuck in, we have to get it perfect, and so they never end up starting the improvement process. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's probably a big one. I think, I don't have a perfect solution, so I don't even want to try. It's like, well, life is not a simple A to Z. It's a lot of little curveballs. And those two, from a mindset perspective, I would say keep it simple and don't let perfect get in the way of good enough. And definitely look for your consultants and vendors who are willing to partner with you to help solve a problem.
Love it. All right. Well, Tom, this was really, really interesting conversation. For those who found our discussion interesting or helpful, where can they go to learn more about Visions or to connect with you?
Yeah, check out our website. We have a couple pages that have some information about how we've leveraged technology. And then we've got a case study page where, a lot of these technology initiatives and partnerships to make things better. We've established case studies with Amazon, Staples, a variety of different vendors. I think there's some tidbits and wisdom in those stories that we're in partnership with our vendors. And definitely, if anybody wants to reach out to me, email me at tafoya@viedu.org. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody if I can help you out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tom, for coming on. This was great.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.